quantum like informatics? Or do you mind explaining that down in layman terms?
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely try my best, but I'll butcher. The idea is to take advantage of the properties of quantum systems to help perform computations.
What are your thoughts about Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Give an absolute banger.
In a more general or holistic setting, like where does that provide value?
Exactly. So that's also another thing. Like, when will quantum computers actually become cost efficient enough? For me, it's just sort of exciting that it's sort of uncertain. There's a potential there to make an impact.
Thank you so much for taking me back to class, man. Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Sippin Soju podcast, episode 15. We're here with a very special guest, my great friend, Mr. Richard/Rich Lee.
Hey, everyone. Hi, Max. I'm really excited and honored to be on the podcast. And yeah, great to see everyone today.
Can you really see them, though?
Yeah, that's true. I can feel their presence. Your millions of fans. Yeah.
Hell yeah. It's actually just me and my 9 bot accounts, but but shout out to all of them for, getting the views up. But awesome, bro. I know it's been like such a long time since I've graduated, and now you're currently at the stage of your life where you're almost about to graduate undergrad. If we can start there, like what types of emotions are you feeling, and overall, how's been your undergraduate journey?
Sure. I think the first adjective that comes to mind is grateful. I'm definitely very grateful for my family and friends who've been there through the ups and downs, especially with the pandemic cutting through my sophomore and junior years, essentially. And a big part of that was spent in Southern California with some family friends, and that was also a very definitive experience for me, and I had a great time there too. But looking ahead to the future, I'm definitely a little nervous about what's to come, but also excited to move to the next stage of my life and to see where the journey will take me.
That's awesome, bro. And this is right before we actually started recording as well, but it's kind of crazy. We were just reminiscing off of, our experiences during undergrad and how, I'm old as fuck now, and and you're at that age where you're like the wise sage of the undergraduate class. So kind of crazy how fast time flies sometimes,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like the time flows even quicker nowadays than what it did just 1 or 2 years ago. Yeah.
Completely agree with that. You brought up a very interesting experience, and I'd like to segue there. Like during the pandemic, you mentioned you were in Southern California. I guess like you mentioned that was a pivotal experience in your life. Curious what you meant by that, if you could elaborate a little more about how your time was there.
Sure. I think that the pandemic made you realize that we've always taken our experiences sort of for granted, where we go through the motions of day-to-day life, or without thinking about what's to come in sort of a broader sense, and I guess not really with that much intent a lot of the times. And sort of being in California made me reflect a lot, especially being physically away from school and what would be the daily routine, about sort of where I want to go for the next phase of my life after school. And so that's one thing, sort of made me take a step back and realize I hadn't really thought that clearly about my future goals at that point in my life. And secondly, it made me appreciate, how warm and welcoming my family friends are. And I really enjoyed hanging out with my 3 god brothers there. And yeah, it was really a really great time, and they're really generous to host me there because I couldn't go home for that period of time. So yeah, I think overall it made me sort of take a step back on the day-to-day routine, and it also made me just appreciate the people around me.
Thanks for sharing that, Rich. I sympathize with like number one, not being able to see your family during one of the toughest times in the US and the world, and to couple that with, having to not only adapt to a new routine, but also, that was really nice that you said you had your God family that provided you with housing and like was able to take care of you and stuff like that. And That's really awesome. But I can understand like that would still be a challenge in itself, just completely different from your normal, I guess probably what you're normally used to.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely also a great point. I think, I was sort of used to slacking off just by myself a lot of the time. So it was great to also be in an environment and to realize that, sometimes you can't sleep in that late and sometimes you gotta get up in the morning and do stuff. But yeah.
For sure, bro. And for I guess like for all the viewers out there, all the potential viewers out there, don't assume who are watching this and who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, do you mind like getting a little bit more into detail as to like where you're from, where you grew up, and where you're at now?
Of course. So hi everyone. My name is Richard. I grew up in Beijing. I was actually born in Boston, but my family moved to China when I was 1.5 years old. Um, and I grew up in the Chaoyang district of Beijing. For anyone who's familiar, I have a really strong uh, memory of that area, and I consider it my home, even to this day. And I went to international school in Beijing for elementary and middle school, and I had a really great time there too. And that's where I also got to learn English. Um, for high school, I went to boarding school in New Hampshire, and at the same time, my family moved to Shanghai, in China. And after high school, I went to. I'm currently at Yale, and that's where I met Max. I'm 2 years younger than Max, and currently I'm a senior in Poly College, living off campus. And I intend to go to physics graduate school, and I'm currently applying this fall, and we'll see where that takes me.
Good luck, man. Physics is hard enough by itself, and that's awesome that you're applying to graduate school and you're pursuing that path. I can imagine not many people would be bold enough to embark on a journey like that.
No, I definitely appreciate those words, and I definitely think it's definitely a tough field, and I have a lot to learn. But it's definitely exciting to do something that I've sort of had in the back of my mind, and it's also a nice full circle moment to start off thinking about majoring in physics and end up potentially pursuing a career in physics. So yeah, I appreciate it.
For sure, bro. Are you interested in astrophysics by any chance, or is that not the sole discipline of interest?
I'm definitely interested in that area, but unfortunately my knowledge in the area is lacking. So uh yeah, I don't know much about astrophysics, but uh that's something that is very interesting to me too. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think he's a great public communicator, great uh publiciter of science, and yeah, I think he's done a good job sort of making science more accessible.
Hey, respect. I think the guy's hilarious. Honestly, he's
Yeah,
the way he explains things, he makes the most like complicated and complex topics just like so understandable, and you can hear the passion in his voice. It's like kind of motivating.
yeah. No, he has like this calming cadence to it, and I don't know if you've seen that Key and Peele sketch, which is a parody of how Neil deGrasse Tyson explains things, but in the context of explaining things to his girlfriend. I think that was a really spot on, sort of both making fun, but also sort of complimenting Neil deGrasse Tyson at the same time. Yeah, I thought that was a great sketch.
I'll have to look into that, man.
Yeah,
That's not on my radar, but that sounds
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
I knew you were interested in physics, but I wasn't necessarily sure like where this passion was coming from. I guess, do you mind unfolding another layer of the onion and giving a little more insight as to like why you became interested in physics?
Sure thing. So I would say a natural beginning to this story would be high school, where I had a really good physics teacher. And this is sort of a common theme for a lot of kids who have a good teacher in high school or earlier on who sort of they looked up to as somewhat of a role model. And this teacher was also a soccer coach of mine. So that I really, I really looked up to him in a certain uh, role model sort of position at school. And I took his class. I really enjoyed it. And at the same time, I had a math teacher at school who was also uh, very great and kind. And he also studied physics in college. And it was great to have these two figures in my life who sort of had a unifying theme of physics. Sort of from a different perspective. One from a more pure physics background, one from more of a math background. And it was great to see that it was definitely something that you could study in college. So at that point, I sort of had this vague idea that I wanted to do physics in college, but I didn't really have an idea of where it would take me in the future, and nor did I think it really long term about whether I wanted to be sort of a professor, stay in academia, or even in general to pursue a career in physics. And the next part sort of starts in college, where I took an introductory physics course, which is required for all the physics majors. And the particular version of the course I took was taught by Professor Gervin, who is at that point I did not realize, but is one of the pioneers of the sort of budding field of quantum information science, which is something that I'd like to go into. So that was sort of a really serendipitous encounter with this subfield of physics that I would eventually be really enthusiastic and excited about. So it was sort of, that was my first experience into this subfield, sort of taking that class and learning some of the basics. And so I asked them if I could, have any opportunities to learn more about this over the summer after my freshman year. And he offered me sort of a position in his lab, and I sort of learned I learned some basic things about the field, and I also, really enjoyed that experience. But it always sort of was in the back of my mind that I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to be in academia. And sort of sophomore fall, I sort of had a hard time thinking about what classes should I take in that semester and the next to sort of orient myself for the future. I didn't really know whether I was sort of interested in physics just as a pure intellectual interest, or whether as a serious career option. So really up until sophomore year and so your senior year, I was really not sure. And I think it really took the pandemic for me to take a gap semester and sort of figure out that I really wanted to pursue a career in this field. So I took the spring of 2021 off, and I had the chance to sort of do some self-learning, a lot of playing around with code, doing a lot of open source challenges, and also doing research on the side. And that's when I realized that I think this is something that is very exciting to go into, especially since it's a really emerging and uncertain, exciting field. So that sort of leads to this point where I still am really trying to figure out what to do for the next phase of my life, but at least I am more certain that I want to take a gamble and see where this interest in quantum information science and quantum computing takes me.
That's so cool, Rich. And like, I completely agree. Like, having those mentors at a younger age, like in high school, when you had the dual influence of not only your soccer coach and also like your physics teacher and your math professor as well, who is also like passionate about physics, and like having them instill that passion into you, I feel like that's so invaluable at a young age, because like honestly, the best teachers oftentimes can influence us more than the subject itself, But I think that's really mature of you to take a gap semester and to really use that time during the pandemic to dive more into your own interests. And very curious, like, I personally have no idea what quantum like informatics or information like science even means. Like, do you mind explaining that down for in layman terms?
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely try my best, but I'll butcher it for sure. Uh, but the idea is to take advantage of the properties of quantum systems to help perform computations. And the two properties of quantum systems that most classical or daily the physical systems that you see on a daily basis don't possess are what's called superposition and entanglement. So roughly speaking, superposition is the idea that a quantum state can, roughly speaking, be in a mixture of many different states at the same time. And that would be like saying a coin is both part heads and part tails, whereas a regular coin can only be heads or tails. And this sort of idea of superposition can allow you to perform certain problems faster, because instead of saying inputting just heads or tails into your problem, you can sort of input both at the same time, and therefore sort of make a parallel computation. Of course, there are caveats with that analogy, but that's sort of the first analogy that a lot of people make. And the second idea, which is entanglement, is the idea that many physical systems cannot be described by just the product of their individual components. They have to be described as a whole. And this idea is not really a classical, doesn't really appear in a classical system. For example, if I have two coins, I could always describe the state of those two coins by specifying the state of one of each coin individually. However, for quantum systems, sometimes you can only describe the state of the whole system, and not just saying what is the state of one times the state of two. You have to sort of describe the whole thing. And this sort of idea is why it's called entangled. The state of the two particles are sort of jumbled up. You cannot untangle the state of those two particles. And the reason why this is so powerful is because by entangling different particles, you can sort of perform conditional operations. For example, if the state of one quantum bit, which is the analog of a classical bit in quantum computing, is in either a 0 or 1, this will lead you to perform an operation that is different. And therefore, you sort of can encapsulate this conditional computation in a very smart way. That's also sort of the rough analogy that a lot of people give first time around.
Thank you for explaining that to me, man. Like that helps a lot. There's still so much more room in order for me to understand this on another level. Give me a second. I need to get more wine.
Yeah, for sure.
Rich, I was not expecting to go back to school today.
For sure. Yeah.
Very curious. So you mentioned superposition and entanglement, or just entangle?
Yes.
Entanglement. So the way you explained each of those two individual, I guess, properties, those were explained very well. In a more general or holistic setting, like why do we care about those things, and in real life, like where does that provide value?
Yeah, that's the golden question. And the short answer is we're not entirely sure. That is the short answer. The long answer is that there are certain problems which quantum computers have been proved to solve much more efficiently than classical computers. For example, the problem of factoring numbers, which sort of underlies internet security these days, can be solved efficiently on a quantum computer. So in this sense, this is sort of a negative result, because it sort of says that a quantum computer can sort of break the security of a classical of our system these days. But actually, it's sort of the flip side of the equation is sort of saying that quantum algorithms sort of inspire more robust classical algorithms and classical cryptographic protocols. So, for example, today, a lot of companies are preparing for the future with algorithms that are robust against quantum cryptography. So it will make our encryption systems stronger in the long run. But that's sort of, that's not really that convincing of a reason why we need quantum computers. The more convincing reason are really, there are several categories. One category is sort of optimization problems, which can be found in almost anything that you speak of. For example, when you want to simulate, let's say, a chemical system, you sort of want to find the ground state energy of a system of molecules. And how do you find the ground state? You usually have to optimize and find the state that gives the minimum energy. So this is sort of a optimization problem because you have to search over all the possible states of the system. And to do that is very time consuming and expensive on a regular computer. However, it's been shown that, or it's very strongly believed that quantum computers can offer a speed up on these types of problems. However, you must be careful because a lot of these computational speed ups are really the subject of research these days. So some problems, such as factoring, have been proven to be faster than classical computers. However, other problems are believed to be faster, but no one actually knows for sure because there is no mathematical proof. There's no 100% certainty. There's sort of like there are mathematical reasons to believe that it's faster, but it hasn't been proven definitively. So the applications that quantum computer is believed to help with include drug discovery, because you could simulate molecular systems and test drug candidates on a much faster and less expensive scale. It includes, say, financial optimization when you're trying to find these asset of stocks or the bundle of bonds and assets that you want to keep for yourself to optimize your profit. It might also include, it might also benefit simulating quantum systems, because right now, to simulate quantum systems, we're using a classical computer, and it's sort of inefficient to do that. Whereas if you use a quantum system to simulate a quantum system, that is far more efficient. So a quantum system could be something like we just described, which is, molecules, but it also could be something like a system of electrons interacting with each other, or a systems of bosons interacting with each other, aka particles of light like photons. Anyways, sort of quantum computing has really the potential to change fundamentally how our society can solve problems, but with the caveat that a lot of the problems these days have not been shown to be definitively solved faster by a quantum computer than a classical computer. And furthermore, the quantum computers that people have these days are very noisy, meaning that they're very bad. The error rates of the quantum bits are very high. So let's say you sort of disturb the system a little bit. The quantum bit is very sensitive to noise. Whereas a classical computer, say even when you drop your computer, you're not really worried about, say, your movie or the files in your computer getting corrupted. Your regular laptop is so robust to different types of noise and environmental sort of perturbations. So anyways, that's sort of the short answer is that quantum computer could sort of revolutionize a lot of computational problems. The most prominent including optimization, simulating natural systems, and factoring, with a few others. But it's still at its very early stages, and it's not entirely certain whether or not it will catch on in the future.
Professor Rich, thank you so much for taking me back to class, man. That was actually, I'm not
You're
gonna
have
lie.
to take another shot of wine.
I'm not gonna lie. This is the first podcast where there's a part of me that feels like something's lacking. Something didn't catch up, but that's actually really, really cool. I knew absolutely nothing about not only the field, but also like what the intended purpose of that field was and like what the applications were prior to 30 minutes ago. So this is actually like really cool, a really cool learning experience for me. I'm wondering, like, since you said quantum computing helps with optimization, it helps with identifying solutions to problems. Is this like a field that people are trying to look more into just because, crypto is something that's been obviously a lot more, exciting as of recent. And I can imagine in the next decade or so, it may even take over as, another valuable and, secure form of currency. And like, I know a lot of people do mining for like Bitcoin and stuff like that. I'm wondering, does this type of computing system help with, algorithms related to stuff like that as well?
Yeah. So I'll begin by saying that I have absolutely no knowledge about cryptocurrency, blockchains, and all that related good stuff. So I really have no authority to comment here. But I will say that you know, I don't think people have a clear understanding of how quantum computers will benefit sort of that area in the future. But I could definitely see how quantum computers could potentially offer an advantage for, let's say, Bitcoin mining. But I don't have enough knowledge to explain why that is the case, or, how that could be the case. I sort of have this general sense that it could, but I just don't know enough. Yeah, to be honest. Yeah.
Gotcha. Hey,
Yeah.
respect for you for, for telling the truth. If you said yeah, absolutely, and like gave me like some reason, I would have believed you on the spot. But dude, going back off of that, I'm very curious in terms of like, so one area that you mentioned that's obviously like very important in order to expand the research and expand the field itself is it efficient enough, and like how to measure it against a regular computing system, and like does it actually provide more value, or is that in terms of like energy, in terms of wattage, in terms of processing time, stuff like that, right?
Sure. Yeah. I would say the first measure that most people will consider is time complexity. So how does the time it takes to solve the problem scale with the size of the problem? So for example, if I have a phone book and I have a list of, my friends who I want to ring up, but I don't know what their numbers are, and let's say I want to call Max, and I want to go through my phone book to look for your name. If the phone book were sorted, so I could look up, the part of my phone book that starts with the letter M. But how do I know that, how do I know where the section starting with M is? The most naive way of doing it would be to say, go to the first page of the book. Is that page the list of names starting with M? Most likely not. Then I go to the second page, and so on. So that's, and I do this until I get to the section of the book starting with M. So as you can imagine, this algorithm is very inefficient, but it offers a first step in so it offers us a chance to see how the complexity of this problem of this algorithm scales with the size of the phone book. If the size of the phone book were double the size, then it would on average take me double the amount of time to get to the letter M. So this time complexity is sort of linear in the problem because it grows linearly in the size of the problem. So there are better algorithms that exist that sort of scale less than linearly. So for example, if I were to, instead of flipping through the start of the book and then go into the second page of the book and so on, if I were to say, start at the middle of the book, and if that page, say is the letter H, I know that the letter M is after H, so I can just start by looking at the second half of the book instead of the beginning. So I only take the second half of the book, then I take the middle of that second half of the book, see what that letter is, say that letter is P. Then I know that the second half of that half doesn't contain the letter M. So I throw that part out. But in this way, I've cut the problem in half every time. And therefore I reach the letter M much faster. And in this case, the time complexity is logarithmic, which is better than linear. So you sort of have this sort of rough characterization of how problems scale, how the time it takes to solve a problem scales. So usually that's how you sort of begin to compare classical and quantum speeds. So if a certain problem solved by a classical computer takes, say, a certain amount of time, has a certain time complexity, how does the best quantum algorithm solve the same problem? Is the time complexity of that problem at least better than that at least as efficient or better than the classical analog. So this is sort of the beginning of where you want to look. And as you mentioned before, it's sort of time is not the only consideration, because if you can solve it, say, in sort of a smaller amount of time, but the amount of energy it takes is a lot higher, or the amount of memory it takes is a lot higher, then it's sort of useless. So
Right.
you sort of also have to keep these other factors in mind. But the time complexity is sort of the most important measure. Yeah.
Can you buy a quantum computer from like your typical like, I don't know, like electronic store, or like where would you even go to get that?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Uh, uh, so unlike a personal computer or laptop where sort of everyone can own one because it's so portable, a quantum computer is usually sort of the size of at least a big fridge, if not bigger. And that's because a quantum bit needs to be kept extremely robust against noise from its surroundings. So it has to be sort of shielded, and it has to be kept really cold, or a lot of the certain realizations of quantum computers have to be kept really cold. And as a result, a quantum computer is not something that's, at least right now, not portable at all. So usually where they're stored are sort of the labs of big companies or universities. And if you want to use a quantum computer, some companies or universities offer sort of programs where you could sign up online and connect to that computer via the cloud. But you can't just sort of go to a store and get a quantum computer, mainly because the technology is really hard to make, at least at this point, to make it portable. It's impossible to make it portable. And also, sorry to make this very long, but a quantum computer is not the same type of machine as a classical computer, in the sense that it is not expected to solve everything that a classical computer does. For example, there are certain problems that a classical computer just already does very well. For example, if I want to make some PowerPoint slides, or if I want to just chat with my friends, there's no need for me to use a quantum computer. So a classical computer, like our laptops, will always exist. A quantum computer will never completely replace classical machines. It will only replace classical machines for certain purposes. So at least what is the most likely scenario in the future is that even when quantum computers become very good at what they're doing, if at all, people will sort of log in to a quantum computer whenever they need. For example, when a business needs to solve a certain problem with their logistics, or trying to solve like a big drug candidate problem, they probably won't have a computer for every person, but they might have a quantum computer installed at their company, or they might seek the help of a partner company who has a quantum computer, and they can use theirs. And it's sort of like logging into a cluster. But yeah, it will never sort of, at least for the near future, I don't see everyone having their own machine, and it would be unnecessary.
Gotcha. Thanks for breaking that down. That was super helpful. Are you able to elaborate a bit further? Can you give me a 3-sentence breakdown? I don't know if this is possible, but can you give me a 3-sentence breakdown as to what a quantum bit is? Because I have no idea.
Yeah, sure. So a quantum bit is very simple. It's any two-level quantum system. And for example, an electron, which might be spin up or spin down, is a quantum bit because it has two states that it could be in, up and down. And you can form superpositions with those ups and downs. So you can sort of have states of the electron where it's some coefficient times up plus some other coefficient times state down. So we're sort of in this mixture.
Right.
So a quantum bit is an exact analogy to a classical bit, such as a coin, which is either heads or tails, a binary digit, which is where the name bit comes from, which is either 0 or 1. It's just that in the case of a quantum bit, instead of just being in these two states, you can be sort of in an intermediate state, a mixture of both the zeros and ones. So that's a quantum. Yeah, a quantum bit is just any two-level system. Any two-level quantum system.
In that case, you mentioned that a quantum computer has a quantum bit like housed in the very center of it, or like protected within layers, right? how
Yeah,
does one like get how does one get a quantum bit like secure enough in that state and housed to use for quantum computing? Because like that, I just can't fathom. I just can't fathom like how one would do that. You know?
yeah, for sure. That's honestly a very, yeah, that was a question that I wondered when I first encountered this subject, and uh the the short answer is that it's a very hard technical challenge.
Sure.
So there are different candidates for how you might build a quantum computer. So one candidate, and one of the most popular candidates these days, is called the superconducting qubit, or a superconducting quantum bit. And the idea is to make a qubit by sort of making an electrical circuit. And the states of this circuit will tell you whether the modes of this circuit will tell you whether or not your system is in state 0 or state 1. And forget the technical details, but in order for this quantum bit to work, you have to keep this at very, very low temperatures. So you sort of don't want any thermal fluctuations, otherwise, which essentially is environmental noise. So as a result, you sort of have to have a dilution fridge, which is a relatively available commercial product, which is
Okay.
it's essentially a multi-layered fridge. That's sort of the first layer, cools it down to sort of pretty low temperatures, and then the next stage cools it down to sort of very, very low temperatures, and then it sort of progressively gets colder. And then at the bottom of this dilution fridge, you have a qubit or multiple qubits sitting there. So that architecture sort of is how one might say realize a quantum bit. So there are also other candidates for making a quantum computer. So, for example, a trapped ion, which is also another popular platform, which is an alternative to superconducting qubits, is also something that people are exploring. But no one is sure which candidate is certain to win out, because it's still in the early stages, and no one knows which candidate is the best. So people think that this candidate might win out in the end because it has certain advantages, but it also has drawbacks that other candidates sort of do better in. So whereas in classical computing, like in our laptops, everyone sort of agrees what the architecture is. The way you build a classical computer is using transistors. You sort of just use electrical signals.
Right.
So right now, people are still very much exploring how do you even build a quantum computer. And no matter what candidate people have come up with these days, the answer is almost always the same. You need to be really protective of your quantum bit. And as a result, you sort of have to shield it from the environment, either by cooling it or using really smart tricks, like instead of using a quantum bit, you use other instead of using superconductors, you use other platforms, and so on. So yeah, that's the idea. The idea is sort of you want to isolate it from the environment, and to do that, you sort of can come up with different ways to tackle that. And people are still not sure which is the best way.
Gotcha, dude. Like being able to have a multi-layered, like thermoregulated environment at very cool temperatures, that shit cannot be cheap.
Yeah,
That cannot be cheap to maintain,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that shit is usually around, I'm guessing it's probably, at least a few hundred K, if not millions, for just to get a single, a big enough dilution fridge. And that's, sort of a lot of where the cost comes in, because if you just have one dilution fridge for one qubit, then if you have multiple qubits, which is, you need at least, thousands, if not millions of qubits to do any sort of non-trivial calculation that might be better than classical computers.
Okay.
You would need a huge fridge,
right,
or you
right.
need some smarter way of doing this. So that's also a problem that people are trying to figure out these days. It's sort of, how do you scale quantum bits to a level where we can actually use quantum computers? Right now, you have sort of a lot of companies have, a few qubits or a few dozen qubits in sort of these really big fridges. But how do you take this to the next level? No one really knows as of now. Yeah.
That's insane, man. I can imagine, just like to build off of what you just said and to emphasize something I think you stated a little bit earlier as well, just like the sheer size and cost of a quantum computer present day compared to like your simple, simple like personal computers, I can imagine like I wonder at the same cost and at the same size, like what the computing differences are between the two systems. Obviously, that's still being
Mhm.
worked out current state, but I can imagine like you could probably have a fuck ton of like personal laptops and computers like working on the same problem,
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. So that's also another thing. Like when will quantum computers actually become cost efficient enough such that, the equivalent amount in regular
Right.
computers won't solve the same problem in the same amount of time. So yeah, exactly. That's definitely, so right now it's still really, really early for to say anything about quantum computers. Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, that's so cool that like number one, you have an interest in physics, and number two, that like that's something that you spent some time to really think about. Is this like an opportunity, like long-term wise in your career that you want to pursue? And like that is the case. Like I'm happy for you, bro. That's awesome.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's definitely like sort of, you know, it's not really, I definitely have to give credit to like, the events in my life and the people that I encounter more so, than say, I did this, I did that. I definitely think it's sort of learning from people, like talking to people who like know the subject better than I do, and sort of just taking it one step at a time. And I think it's just, for me, it's just sort of exciting that it's sort of uncertain. There is a potential there, and to make an impact. And I'm sure, like, yeah, it's like the work that you do, right? It's also sort of, you're also thinking like how could this sort of benefit more people and sort of change people's lives on like a fundamentally good way. So I think, yeah, I feel like it's that sort of potential that gets you excited. And well, I think in your case, you're more directly changing people's lives already, whereas for me it's like in the future perhaps it might, but I think that's something. It's just it's a question that sort of is enough to get me motivated to to continue going.
For sure, man. Like definitely number one, like the potential of having a positive impact on others. And number two, just like being one of the first pioneers in like something that's completely unknown or like not completely understood. I feel like that's super fucking exciting. So that's awesome that like that's something that you're currently pursuing. And yeah, man, like I'm excited to hear the good news about potential grad school options, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely need to keep you updated, and yeah, if not, ask for some advice. Yeah.
For sure, bro.
Yeah.
I know we're running short on time here, but wanted to ask you three quick rapid fire questions if that's cool with you.
Yeah, of course. Definitely. Yeah.
What is, have you been keeping up with Premier League at all?
I have. Yeah.
Who is your
I
team
very
now,
much.
bro? Who is your team?
I think you're gonna lose some fans after I say this team, but Manchester United. I think they're something about the team. Just they sort of had this enduring legacy, no matter how shit they are. But this year they started out really poorly, but they seem to be, picking themselves back up together. So I'm excited to see what they do, and they have some pretty exciting young talents. But I definitely don't think they're gonna win the league. But I want to see them back in the Champions League next year. But another thing I'm excited to see is Holland, and his once in a lifetime sort of showcase of how brilliant a player can be. He's just been on fire, scoring basically every game for Man City. Yeah, and yeah, I've been following the Premier League every week, and yeah.
Let's
have
go,
you been
man.
have you
Yeah,
been following?
yeah. Well, I recently started following the last 2 months. I've been watching like
Okay, nice.
the
Yeah,
Sunday highlights. Like I don't have time
yeah,
to watch
yeah,
the
yeah.
whole
Right.
matches, but dude,
Yeah,
Kevin De Bruyne and Holland,
right,
that's
right.
that's crazy, bro. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's honestly unreal. Yeah,
It's crazy
I
how
think I
two individual players can literally like destroy a single team. Like that's just unfathomable to me.
yeah. Honestly, yeah, it's pretty like surreal to see like how the connection between them is. Before De Bruyne just sort of needed that striker to finish off the balls that he was passing into into the box. And now that you have Holland, it's sort of complete. Both sides of the equation is complete. Yeah. Yeah.
I also think like you enjoying Manchester United, like that is, and you like rooting for them. I don't think that's like, I don't think that's like a, I don't think it's a negative thing. I definitely think it's questionable how they will perform against other teams in the Premier League, but
For sure.
that's
Yeah.
dope, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll be able to see a game with Ronaldo before he maybe retires or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely hope he like sort of gets back into better form and scores a few more goals than the start of the season. Yeah.
All right, switching gears from soccer. Speaking of hobbies, have you been playing soccer recently, or like at all since like the school year started? And like any new hobbies, man? Get me up to speed.
So yeah, I actually haven't played soccer since school started, but over the summer, uh, I played soccer a fair bit actually. There was another intern in my cohort who was also he was better at soccer than I was, but he sort of once considered playing college soccer, but he didn't end up doing it. But we played a lot of pickup soccer when we're at Princeton and at IBM. So when we're at Princeton, there were sort of grad students who had, they had pickup soccer every Thursdays and Sundays, and we'd always go to that. So, that was a lot of fun. And my PI also went to that on some Sundays. So
No way.
it was pretty fun to see him there too. And he had some moves. So
If you nutmeg your PI, would he give you the day off?
Yeah, dude, I feel like if I nutmeg him, then he probably make me work for the next week, bro. Like but unfortunately, yeah, that's not happened. But yeah, we play on the same team more often than not. And when he was on a different team, he was still pretty good. And I definitely would not be able to nutmeg him. He's a good player. And and yeah. And then when we're at IBM, there was like this pickup league that was organized by some of the more seasoned people there, and that was also a lot of fun. Unfortunately, there was a crucial moment where I had to step up and take a penalty, but that penalty was one of the the lesser penalties that you'll see anybody take. It was not on target. Let's just let's just say that.
I was gonna ask, did it at least have a chance of going in goal?
The the expected goals of that were were not very high.
Did you at least try to go for a chip?
No, you see, I didn't have the swagger. But if you were there, I might have the confidence. But
If I were there, you would have went with a Robana. Guaranteed.
Yeah. I think your audience should know that this man Max was a tank for Murray IM soccer back in the day, the pre-pandemic days. This man was the muscle behind the team. I remember there was one time, I forget which college we played, but he was just on fire. He just dribbled multiple people and then gave an absolute banger. And that's just pretty. I think that's just pretty representative of the type of player that he is. Yeah.
Yo, if any foreign clubs are still recruiting a washed 24-year-old, let me know. That's hilarious, man. Hey, I appreciate the support and just like mentioning that on the pod, man. Yo, you're a real one for that.
Nah,
Bro.
just speaking the truth.
Last question I have for you before we wrap things up. For anyone who's stuck around this long and who has been graced by your knowledge and wisdom of quantum physics and quantum computing, I guess, like, do you have any inspirational advice or any lessons learned? Just like one piece of advice, any final remarks? The floor is yours, bro.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks everyone who's still sticking around. Really sorry to bore you with all my physics antics, but yeah, I really, I really don't have any profound advice, but I would say, sort of really take the time to sort of at least think about what you want to do in the future, no matter how old or how young you are. And sort of, I think it's a really great investment on your part because it's never a waste of time, because even if you don't come to an answer. It will at least get sort of, it will at least eliminate some options for you. You'll know what you don't like to do, or what sort of things that you should be doing in order to move closer to your goal. So at least sort of take the time to sit down and think for a little bit, whenever you can, about sort of what you want to do in the future. Because at least for me, that sort of really made me orient like the rest of the things I do in my life in a lot sort of clearer sense. So yeah, that's my lame advice, but yeah.
Dude, not lame whatsoever. Completely like applicable advice to everyone who's listening, regardless of where they are in their life or what they're pursuing in their career. Dude, thank you so much for not only taking me back to school, but also giving me the shout out in soccer, bro. Really appreciate having you on here, bro.
No, of course. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and hope we can run some FIFA back soon.